Good morning to the Cranleigh community. I know I said last week that it was the last session of the term, and you can tell that I want spring break because now we are at the last session of the term. And you know what? I'm going to say we've saved the best till last. Before I tell you about our speaker, I just want to apologise if there are any technical difficulties. My Wi-Fi at the moment, obviously with all the children being back, which we are so excited about, is just playing a few games on us. So if I do come in and out, as long as you can hear me, then we're good to go, and I'll ensure our speaker has a seamless transition. So let me just tell you a little bit about our speaker. I feel very privileged because I have known this speaker personally for a while now as a member of our valuable CCC. So my loyalties lie very close to her, and my heart is with her and what she can offer. So Samia, a skilled subject matter expert with over 15 plus years of experience in the fields of educational leadership, education programming, and curriculum development. Certified early childhood development specialist in the Montessori teaching pedagogy. And what is so amazing about this speaker is she's not just a parent, she's not just a CCC member, but she understands the educational landscape. So I know that when I'm talking to her, I really, really feel like she's listening as a parent, as a teacher, as an educator, colleague, and actually as a valuable member of the community. So I feel very privileged to be able to welcome this speaker. She is very humble. So she might not necessarily sell herself actually how amazing that she is, but I said to her, go for it, because she has a wealth of experience that I want the parents of the community to hear. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Samia. Good morning.
Good morning, Natasha. Good morning, everybody.
I'm really hoping you can hear me. Samia was saying before that I was a little bit frozen. So hopefully I've frozen in a position where I look rather attractive this morning. As long as you can hear me. As long as you can hear me, I just want to say a massive, massive thank you on behalf of obviously our principal, Mike Wilson, the school, and obviously the CCC. It's so lovely, as I said, over the years, to have many more speakers that are speakers in our parent body, and especially a speaker of the CCC, because this is what you've created as a body of members. And it's so exciting to now have you speak on behalf of them and on behalf of obviously positive parenting, which we're going to be looking at today. So I will hand over to you, and if there is anything at all, I will jump in and ensure that our technical difficulties get erased as quick as possible. To everyone listening and watching, please do put your questions for Samia in the Facebook chat or the YouTube chat, and we'll try and answer as many of those as possible at the end.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you for giving me the opportunity today. It is certainly very exciting to be with you all and to share some of important positive parenting tips that I have researched on and been able to share over the years. I will go ahead and share my screen with you all so I can share my presentation. There we go. All right. All right, so today we're going to discuss positive parenting. And of course, some of you may be asking or wondering, so what is positive parenting within the context of the discussion today? And essentially, positive parenting can be broken down into three different elements. We will be looking at different areas of how we affect our children's lives as adults. And the three main elements to bring to your attention today especially are respecting the child as a person with unique abilities and potentials, promoting a caring and nurturing bond with your child, and sharing values that are built on mutual trust and respect for everyone. I think I would be a little remiss if I were not to delve a little bit into early childhood development and some of the research that's been done into cognitive and executive function. Early experiences affect the development of brain architecture, essentially, which provides the foundation for all future learning, behavior, as well as health. The brain has an amazing ability to change in response to its different experiences. One of the pioneers of early childhood development, who of course I follow very closely, is Dr. Maria Montessori. And she explained that children are born from the age of birth with an absorbent mind, and their brain is essentially like a sponge, which is able to take in all the whole environment around them. Emotional well-being and social competence provide a strong foundation for emerging cognitive abilities, and together they are basically the meat and the bones of the brain. A fundamental skill that develops during the ages of 3 to 8 especially is an understanding that others have thoughts and beliefs that are coming from a different perspective than your own. This is also known as theory of mind. Without it, essentially think of it as children can't learn how to manage the increasingly complex social interactions of early childhood. So when we think of cognitive and executive function development, think of questions such as, how does my child learn to follow directions, or basically pay attention, whether in the classroom or at home? How are they able to navigate everything that's going on all around them? Essentially comes down to executive function and self-regulation. These are basically skills that are the mental process and that enable us to plan, focus attention, remember instructions, and juggle multiple tasks all at the same time. Acquiring the early building blocks of these skills is one of the most important and challenging tasks of the early childhood years. Their strength is critical to healthy development. Think of it kind of as an air traffic control system at a busy airport, safely managing the arrivals and the departures of all the aircrafts coming in, from the multitude of runways. The brain basically needs this skill set to filter distractions, to prioritize tasks, set and achieve goals, and control impulses. So executive function and self-regulation basically are dependent on 3 types of brain functions: working memory, as you see here, mental flexibility, and self-control. If we were to look at self-control, basically the self-control enables us to set priorities and resist impulsive actions or responses. Working memory then governs our ability to retain and manipulate distinct pieces of information over short periods of time. The mental flexibility helps us to sustain or shift attention in response to different demands or to apply different rules in different settings. An example which I came across would be, for example, when a child is having to take turns, whether it's in the classroom or at a play yard or even in anywhere else. They have to have self-control by stopping what they're doing and allowing another child to take a turn. Then when it is your turn again, you have to remember what it is you're supposed to be doing, which pulls on your working memory. And if the children taking a turn after you, for example, do something completely unpredictable and totally different, you have to be able to adjust what you will in turn do next. Those who have all of this in sync are usually able to have very favorable outcomes and success in how they essentially go on with their daily function in life. Those who struggle a little bit with these capacities, oftentimes as adults, we will see those children, for example, struggle. Maybe perhaps they seem too distracted. Maybe for some teachers, sometimes you think that the child's not paying attention. Or even as parents and adults, we see that sometimes children have difficulty navigating through some of the difficult situations that life has thrown at us. The key, of course, is counterbalancing all of these automatic responses with building up the stronger core capabilities. By simplifying things, building on strengths, and providing support to lessen the stress. Helping children build these skills helps give them a strong foundation for everything that comes later. We can even see in teens, when we help build their skills, it propels them to greater success as adults, as parents, and later ensures success at work, in their homes to provide stability, and for them to be able to have responsive relationships for the future. Creating a positive cycle basically passes on from one generation to the next and is the ultimate goal of any society. I'm sure many of you have heard of social and emotional development and how it's been used a lot in many discussions when it comes to human development, psychology, early childhood development. Social and emotional development is essentially the ability to regulate one's emotions and is rooted in our experiences within our environment and our interactions with others from basically birth onwards. Early childhood specialist Raver stated, in early years, children basically learn how to verbalize their emotions, distract themselves with other things that may soothe them, solicit support from others, and learn coping behaviors, such as even fighting back, and even sometimes hitting or screaming. These are all made possible with the development of executive functions. So how do we teach children empathy, for example? A professor at NYU, Joe Shikawa, stated that humans are wired for empathy at birth. So when a baby hears, for example, another baby crying, that's when they're learning, that's when that baby is learning what it sounds like when another human is in distress. You'll see that sometimes if you've had the opportunity to visit, a room in the hospital where the babies are. One child, usually starts crying, or baby starts crying, and you'll see it's almost like a domino effect. So as children grow to understand others' motivations, empathy grows. These in turn lead to pro-social behaviors, such as expressing concern and providing comfort to others. One of the researchers that I had come across stated, feeling guilt or remorseful is a combination basically of empathy plus the realization that your course of action can cause another distress. And so you're probably asking, why is this important? Well, it's important because it helps cognitive function in adults to recognize concepts of fairness and justice. Coping with conflict is usually embedded in how well we can self-regulate. When children struggle sometimes with self-regulation, oftentimes we see internalized behaviors manifest itself in, for example, anxiety and withdrawal. However, when children externalize those behaviors, oftentimes they show up as fighting, throwing tantrums, and different kinds of behaviors that we as parents may not often find as desirable. But this is essentially children coping, and it's not just in the early years. We see this even in our adolescence and in our teens. So I've given you quite a bit of background now into the cognitive function and how the brain works in humans and in children specifically. But also I think it's important for parents to understand that ultimately what we're all doing is setting up our children for success. And there's three key components that I often go back to when thinking about how it is we set up our children for success. It's the notion that all children are entitled to be cared for in an environment in which they feel safe and should be respected as individuals. There have been many amazing early childhood development specialists and educators and philosophers that have talked about this concept of individuality, and how when we truly understand our children as individual beings that merit respect, it's often amazing at how wonderfully we can see them thrive and survive in society. Parents should also always try to aim to promote an environment where they feel happy, valued, and secured. We have all faced very profound moments. We've all faced very profound moments this past year. COVID has obviously been very difficult for many individuals around the world. And I think it would be wrong for me to say under this last context that we are constantly feeling happy these days, or that we are constantly feeling valued and even secure as adults. So how is it that we can even pass that on to our children? And I always say that it's the way we talk to our children. It's the way we exude our own emotions and feelings. And while it's very hard and difficult sometimes, and it's not easy, we do have to learn how to navigate, and again, going back and relying on those executive functions that I talked about. Again, not to gloss over our own emotions and feelings, but it's essentially important to provide that stability for the children so that they can see that we will in fact be able to control what we can, and what we can't control, sometimes we have to discuss it, name it, just so that we are not ignoring it. We recognize it, but that that there are solutions to almost every problem. Therefore, personal, social, and emotional development really is at the core of positive parenting. So of course, within all of this, there also comes this idea of setting ground rules. As parents, we instill positive parenting through our ground rules, which include respecting others, respecting our belongings and the environment. We should also remain cognizant of what behaviors we are modeling ourselves, and what values we promote so as to enhance desirable behavior. I'll share an example. A short while ago, one of my teachers, when I was still working at the nursery, came up to me, and we had a discussion about, a little girl having a difficult day, and they were having a celebration in the classroom, and the little girl was not having a good day. She was not being very kind to her friends and had made one of her peers cry. So we talked about it. We talked about the teacher and I, and then when the parent came in to pick up her daughter that day, we said hello, greeted each other, and then she said, "Well, how did she do?" And I smiled and I said, "Well, I'm sure you'll have your discussion with the teacher, and then we can circle back." So when she came out, she had a smile on her face and she was laughing, and she said, "Oh, we talked about it, and everything's okay." I'm like, "Oh, that's wonderful, great." And then all of a sudden, the little girl looked up to her, mom and said, "I would like a candy cane." It was during the holiday season, so we had a basket of candy canes out, at the front desk. So she said, "Yes, of course you can have a candy cane," and she handed the candy cane over to her little daughter. So of course, in that moment, I thought to myself, "Oh, it was a great teachable moment that this parent could have shared with her child." Not that we are, not that we have to shame our children in front of others. Just the thought, just the fact that some teachable moments are, good ways of managing expectations and setting those ground rules. Perhaps rather than giving a candy cane to that little girl that at that moment, this parent could have used that teachable moment to say, "Well, we didn't have a very good day today. And we have to learn to be kind to our friends. So let's talk about it, when we get home. And maybe tomorrow you'll have a better day, and then you could come back and get the candy cane." So again, it's all about managing expectations and setting those ground rules and modeling those behaviors. And of course, in all these moments, we should always try to aim to ensure the individual needs of our children are being met by providing clear, consistent, and developmentally appropriate expectations for behavior, as I just mentioned. And how can we do this? There are many ways, but I've pointed on 6, you could say, priorities. One is respect, by encouraging all children to have respect for themselves, for other people, other people's feelings, beliefs, and values, and for the environment, including property. Another is understanding and compassion, by encouraging children to understand other people's views and experiences, and to be caring and tolerant, most importantly, towards others. Responsibility is also key, by enabling children to have an increasing ability to make choices and take responsibility for their own actions, helping children to develop and understand the consequences of their behavior, as I just mentioned in that example. Fairness and equality is also key, by giving children an understanding of how to be fair to all and how to share and give everyone an equal chance within the context of everyone having different needs. It's amazing how we can, teach children from a very young age, and how they are also have an innate ability to understand that everyone does come with different needs, and not everybody will necessarily be on the same level playing field. And this is something that can be taught at a very, very early age. Kindness, of course, is, I think, probably one of the most important, by promoting acts of kindness towards each other and to assist children in ways of being gentle towards everyone. And then finally, and of course not last, but supporting the use of positive reinforcement. So by acknowledging considerate, appropriate, and expected behavior, and reinforcing positive behavior by building our children's confidence and self-esteem. So on the heels of that notion of building self-esteem, there are so many amazing intrinsic values that we end up teaching our children as educators, as parents, and adults. And really, truly, early childhood development can be seen in the best practices in a very holistic manner, in which it's an interdisciplinary approach where we get everybody involved, right? So we have the families involved, we have healthcare involved, ensuring that children, have proper nutrition and are growing well and are growing in a stable environment. We have the schools, our nurseries, teachers are involved. And these are all very important players in helping build our children's confidence, self-esteem, and independence. And so how do we promote independence? Some ways we can promote independence is by praising them, by focusing on positive things that they do, by helping them to recognize their feelings and expressing themselves in an acceptable way, encouraging them to ask for help from their peers as well as adults. Oftentimes, we find that our children, it's easier for them to ask their peers versus asking adults. In other examples, we see some children are more comfortable with adults than they are with peers. But encouraging them to ask for help regardless of who they're asking is crucial in the context of promoting independence. Building their independence then through self-help skills is also key. When we are allowing our children to find solutions for themselves, whether they're using analytical skills or whether they're physically learning things such as the basic self-help skills, tying their shoes, learning how to feed themselves. These are all really important to helping build their independence. And then, of course, learning from each other, as I touched upon a little bit earlier. By learning from each other, we learn that, we are able to share our experiences, and others can also, we can also learn from theirs. So keeping in mind, and of course, knowing that it's Mindful March, and as I mentioned a bit earlier, we are now in such a different phase of our lives, and I'm sure it'll be very interesting to read what research will show years from now. It's important to remember that we also have to remind our children on how to care for others. And there are some really, proven, you can say, techniques on how we can do that, some which I've listed here. One is using conflict resolution and keeping calm. Sometimes that can be challenging as parents and adults. But essentially, of course, we're exuding, we are exuding that in that moment how we should feel, and by keeping calm, of course, as well as we can, is really essentially going to benefit your child. Role modeling appropriate behavior, of course, which I touched upon. Working on and reinforcing the understanding of feelings, and I think this is what I said a while ago, is that when we can actually acknowledge that feelings come from somewhere, that they are rooted in other things, whether, as I mentioned earlier, and whether it's a reaction to a conflict resolution that's going on, it's important to recognize that. Naming and making feelings clear, including the consequences of their actions. When sometimes, we see that a child is unwell, maybe they are throwing a tantrum, maybe they're very sad, maybe they're not talking. Sometimes there are physiological things that children can point to that are easier for them to explain than social and emotional. So, for example, oftentimes there's an exercise we would do in the classrooms with early childhood, in our early childhood classrooms, where you can almost like draw a figure of a body. And oftentimes when children are feeling hungry and you ask them, well, what's wrong? Why are you so upset and why are you crying? Where does it hurt? And they can usually point to, the stomach area, which of course automatically makes you think, oh, they're probably hungry. That's why their stomach is growling or hurting. Sometimes children point to their head because maybe they're having a headache. Maybe things are too overwhelming for them right now, and so on. So it's really important to be able to name and make those feelings heard. Being aware of the power of language, of course, is also important. Trying not to be confrontational or negative. This also encourages on caring for others and boosting self-esteem, of course. And of course, giving time to listen, allowing our children, essentially allowing our children to be able to express themselves and helping acknowledge their responses sensitively. So that basically comes to the end of my talk. And I'd like to, of course, open it up to the Q&A with everybody and invite Natasha back on.
Thank you so much, Sammy. I was just making sure that I was actually not a robot and you could hear me. So hopefully that we won't be disrupted by that. Thank you so much. I mean, I was sitting there making notes and relating it to my daughter Isla and actually how I parent, which at times I would say isn't always the best with everything we're trying to manage. But it's so nice to have relatable strategies and things, strengths and skills that I could pick up on that I was doing actually correctly, or things that just reassured me in terms of how I'm developing her, even though she's not in nursery at the moment. So that was really reassuring. And what I think is really powerful is all of the skills and strategies you were talking about in early childhood and how it grows and builds. I was trying to reflect on what we're also doing in school for seniors. And my first question, if it's okay, before I hand over to any other questions from the community, is you spoke a lot about, and obviously that's your area of expertise, early childhood, and you having, teenage children, and now with them growing, how important is it for us as parents and educators, or you can divide up the question, to not forget that actually this is a continual journey, this is a progressive journey. It isn't just what we do in the early years that's really important, even though it is what you're saying, is actually how we mold and how we do these strategies and how we do these tangible things as they're still growing and developing. And what would be really good is to hear your thoughts on that, because you have an older child as well. So, what's your response to that in terms of the importance of the journey? And when we get to those older years, into senior school, even upper prep, do we just forget about it? Is there a point where we stop instilling this? Is there a point where we have to reestablish some of these routines or skills or strategies? It'd be good to hear your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. And it's a great question, Natasha. As you touched upon, yes, I have two boys. One is 17 in A levels. And of course, one is turning 13 next month in year 8. And absolutely, I think, if I recall, my mother always used to say, as parents, we do the best that we can with what we have and at the moment that we're parenting. So there's never really truly any right or wrong, first of all. And absolutely, learn the building blocks that are formed from a very early age essentially do set the foundation for your child, right? And for us as adults even. So when we look at us as individuals today, whoever we are today has been formed upon those building blocks that we learned through our experiences, through our nature and nurture, right, from our parents and how we were raised and the environment that we were raised in. But what's very important and that you brought up is that how do we continually parent, or how do we continually guide our children as they navigate through a very complex world. And even as I touched upon today's world, we are constantly adapting, constantly asking them to change. For example, the past few months, have been a roller coaster for, a big portion of the school's age group, where they were coming back one day, not coming back another day. And you see that even despite, all the reinforcements that you've given your child from a very early age, we do need to to have those reminders. We do need to have those discussions. I think the most important thing that we can do as adults and not just parents is keep those lines of communication open. And sometimes it's so hard, as maybe some parents can relate to who have older children, to drag out that information from them, to really, truly, really try to find out, why are they so quiet today, or why are they not feeling well, actually not physically feeling well. And then you have to kind of step back, I think, as parents and say, all right, let's compartmentalize. Let's see how, what has been going on. Let's look at all the moving the moving blocks and see, has there been any change? And this is what I've always said to parents, especially who've come, who's drop off their children first day at nursery, right? There's so much anxiety built in, and the children have that separation anxiety. But it's important to step back and say, all right, what's changed? Sometimes things have changed in your child's life. Sometimes there's a lot going on in your child's life. Sometimes people are traveling. People are coming and going in your child's life. Parents often travel as well. Teachers come and go as well. There's a lot of things. Friends come and go. Families leave, and even as adults, we are constantly. Our brain is constantly required to adjust and manipulate the situation to make us feel comfortable. So I think as parents, it's very important to just step back and look at all the moving parts and try to recognize, outside of what's in these four walls, what else is happening, in our child's lives that could be affecting them emotionally or even physically.
And I think that leads on to, the title of your talk is positive parenting. It's not parenting, getting it right all the time, or perfect parenting. It's about having that positive spin on what we can control, or what's going on, in our environment, or, internally, externally. And I think actually as parents, and especially as parents, and I'm speaking just from, I can't presume what everyone else feels, but speaking from a parent of a young child, and working, that actually we've got to have that focus on the positive aspect, and controlling what we can control, and being that positive role model, and having those conversations, or mimicking that behavior, role modeling that behavior, rather than thinking it as something that has to be a finished product. Because I know, as a new mum, I've gotten used to one routine and one aspect of my child, and then suddenly there's something else, like potty training, or first day at nursery, or meeting, going around a friend's to sleep over for the first time. All of these different milestones that you think you've tackled one and then there's something else to kind of manage as a parent. And I think what would be, and this is hard, because there's a few questions coming through, but just before we move on to the next question, what would be your top tip for a parent that is navigating, whatever age they're trying to navigate their child through the journey, whether it be young, and I know it's hard, but what would be your top tip? And you did speak a lot about what we should be doing for the children, but what would be your top tip for parents to take away from this, to know, okay, I've got this. It's going to be a journey, but it would be good to know, from your experience, being a parent, being an educator, everything, a specialist in this area. What would be your top tip for a parent? What do they need to hear right now to keep them going?
Well, I think I've touched upon communication. I think that's integral. Keeping communication open with your children at every level, at every stage. Keeping those open-ended questions coming, and not just asking, the simple closed-ended questions of yes and no. But also consistency, Natasha, I think is really important. Not that we shouldn't be teaching our children how to be able to adapt to change, but all children, need the consistency. So as adults, if we can provide some consistent things in their lives, it really helps providing that secure feeling I mentioned. And it could be in any area. It could be having dinner consistently together. It could be dropping off, in the morning, the school run, together. It could be every Wednesday, there's, a sports, lesson taking place, and you're taking your child to that. Just consistency in general helps really, truly make the child feel secure. And when you have secure children, often, of course, it just makes it a little bit easier. Right? It makes those discussions become easier. And those moments become easier. So consistency is really important, I would think, as a top tip.
And that's great, because that actually leads into a question about in the current times. And you did speak about it, that we're navigating all these changes and disappointments that we're facing as parents and as children, not being able to see relatives and friends abroad, and there is a lot of uncertainty. So you may have already answered this in your previous answer when I was asking you, but how do we navigate that as parents? So consistency is really important. But there are a lot of us, or I would say 99% of us, that are having to continuously manage change and uncertainty. And consistency is key at home, and ensuring you have those regular check-in points, which sounds a bit formal, but you can do that with even the little ones at home, whether it be a story before bedtime that I do, etc., etc. Is there anything else about, as parents, how do we have conversations, or how do we navigate our children through these times? Have you got any top tips from a kind of educational point of view, or just as a parent? That was one question that's just come in.
I think all of us are experiencing very unique situations at home, and absolutely, navigating through today's world is different than maybe even navigating it 2 years ago, and will look different, by the way, even next year. I think that what this pandemic in general has taught us is that never to expect, to always expect change, because it is inevitable. I think what I know is that when we can understand our children and in dealing with them compassionately, and just and using real life experiences, I think sometimes what's great is connecting with your child on a real life lesson level, using things that are happening around the world and relating to that. And of course, they may not be able to relate to it. They may actually not even be able to relate to their cousins or family members or friends back home that are in different countries right now, dealing with things very differently. Some of our friends and family members are going to school, for example. Some of them are not. Some of our friends and family are working from home. Some are not. Some are restricted and in lockdowns. There's so many things that are going on today. And while it's very difficult to, and it's absolutely not easy to hold on to the same rituals every day. But at the same time, I think leaving yourself open to those discussions and talking to your child about what is truly happening in the world around them. And when it comes to, unfortunately, dealing with some of the more, difficult topics and discussions with children, of course, at that point, I would say, you would, probably obviously need an expert, in those areas who can help you if the struggle becomes too difficult. But on a level that's, attainable for parents, I think, by recognizing that that our children are unique individuals, that even maybe in your home of 2 children, one is very different than the other. Maybe one requires something a little bit more than the other. And just being cognizant of that, I think, Natasha, and truly just trying to step back, as I said, and recognize the unique abilities that our children have, and then relating to them on that level.
And I think it's important, before we go to the last question, I hope you can hear me because my internet's gone a little bit funny, but it's important to actually, there was a line that struck with me, or a word that struck me about real life experiences. And of course, we do not want our children to be pithy or to observe anything that's not very nice or scary in this world as such. But actually, I know, living in Abu Dhabi for 7 years, we are very lucky to be here, and it's very different from my hometown in London. But it's actually important that we do experience these turbulent times, not necessarily COVID, but we do experience these times or these barriers, so that our children can actually work out how to navigate. We can have those conversations. And I think that was really important, that you're not coating over saying everything should be positive and perfect, but you're actually saying, let's deal with this as a family or as individuals, as a mother, son, etc., etc. And I think that's really important for parents to hear, and for us to hear as a community, rather than to try and hide and shy away, because that's not how we're going to equip our children, our young learners, to be able to navigate, because there's going to be many more challenges ahead. One of the last questions that's a little bit more digital focus, so don't feel you you have to come from more of your background, because I know you've already had digital talks, but one of the concerns a parent has is the overwhelm intrusion of online platforms. So maybe, you know, for the older, you know, maybe upper prep or the older, you know, and social media's had on our relationships, especially with our children. And I think the question is, what is the right way to balance oversight and check in with not being overly invasive and seen as we're nagging?
No, I think it's a very good question. And I think in today's world, especially, whether you have children in early years or your children are teenagers, we're all experiencing this. We're all having to balance that digital time. And it's so funny because when all of this started, of course, right away, you're like, all right, let's get into this mode where we're going to move to digital, right? Last year, we all kind of parents were into this, all right, let's get on with it and, focus. And we're all very proactive. And of course, now 1 year later, I think we're all kind of, tired out, right? There was something I was reading about Zoom fatigue. People are having it in the workplace even. And just because everything is done so digitally now, even just talking to a relative now, has to be done over everything, over social media sometimes. But so we have to balance. Of course, there is benefits to it as well. There are benefits to being able to Zoom to your family members who you haven't been able to see. But I think being one of the things that it's harder to preach, of course, and maybe it's easier to preach, I mean, and probably more harder to actually do. But I think it's nice to have moments in your day where you can actually be present. I think the most important thing we can do as parents is be present. And I'm not going to lie. There's times when I often find myself looking down at my phone, reading an important email from work, only to have, one of the boys come up to me and ask me a question. I'm like, yes. And then later on, I literally catch myself. I'm like, oh my goodness. I completely, glossed over what he was saying to me. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, with then stepping back and saying, oh, I made a mistake. So you bring your child back in and say, I'm really sorry. You were saying something important to me and I was preoccupied. And can we just have that conversation again? That's the first thing. I think the second thing is, having some moments where you can create, maybe a night, where you can say, all right, we're all going to get together and we'll play board. Let's say we'll play a board game. I know a lot of us have done that all year long now. We've played probably every board game 10 times over in our homes. But, dedicating, sometimes you have to actually dedicate time. So, as parents, we sometimes say we have to dedicate reading time, and we will sit together as a family. Some families do, and they read books together. The same actually now has to apply even to our world to break free from, all the digital exposure. Is you have to say, all right, we're all going to check our phones here on the table. Let's not touch our phones. Let's just see if we can do it. Not touch our phones. Spend half an hour, even an hour. Let's play a board game, or maybe even have a discussion. Talk about something. As I said, I know it's easier said than done, but it's those actual it's those actual moments of being present and carving out time, like actually carving out time and saying, yes, right, this is the time we're going to, to try something new or try this. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, right, it's counterbalancing those automatic responses. The automatic response, I think, for a lot of people is, right, I'm bored, I'm tired, or I'm nervous. I'm going to pick up my phone and just start scrolling through something because it makes us feel comfortable. I think what's happened is we've become very comfortable with our gadgets. So by trying to develop those strong capabilities that I was talking about, and you can still do that. You can still teach that even when you have a teenager at home and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I missed that and I missed that. Nothing is missed. Everything can be taught. That's the beauty of the brain. It just requires a little bit more work. Hence, again, as families, it's a concerted effort, right? That we all have to come to as a family to make those moments and those times happen.
And I think it does link to what we were talking about before about being consistent. So, you know, if a child, you know, maybe thinks that a parent's being naggy, you know, it could just be a bad day. It could be that the parent is being naggy. It could just be, you know, a breakdown of relationship for that moment, as you said. But it also could be that if you're trying to do it haphazardly, or you're trying to do it a one-off, whereas if you're consistent, then I know, you know, even with my little one, if I'm consistent, it really does help me in the long run. So I think linking that with what you said before is really key. I just want to say thank you so much. You know, every time I speak to you, I learn daily when I speak to you, even just we have our chats as a parent, but it's so wonderful for you to be able to give that wealth of knowledge and some strategies and tips to our parent community to get to know you a bit more. You are such a valuable resource as a CCC member, as a parent, and now as a speaker, and I'm really, really grateful, Samia. So thank you so much for speaking so eloquently, but actually bringing it down to a level that we can all understand and relate to, which I think is really important for these, you know, connection sessions. And thank you everyone for joining us, especially this term. We will be back next term after the spring break, where we all are definitely looking forward to a well-deserved rest with our families. And please do stay safe, but we will be in touch with the further speakers in due course. Thank you so much, Samia, once again.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you, everybody.